Inside, the air changed and they all stopped short. Ahead of them was a dark hallway, familiar to them all. Is this? Jessica whispered, not taking her eyes off from the dark expanse. It's here, Shelley thought. She held out her hand for the flashlight and John handed her wordlessly. She shone the light ahead of them, sweeping the halls. They were covered in children's drawings, crayon on yellowing curling paper. She started forward and the others followed, feet shuffling on old tile. It seemed to take forever to traverse the hall, or perhaps it was just that they were moving slowly, with methodical, deliberate steps. Eventually, the hallway opened up into a larger expanse, the dining room. It was just as they remembered, completely preserved. The flashlight beam bounced off a thousand little things, reflective, glittering, or topped with foil ribbon. The tables were still in place, covered in their silver and white checked cloths. The chairs were still pulled up to them haphazardly, some tables with too many and others with too few. It looked as though the room had been abandoned in the middle of the lunch hour. Everyone had gone up expecting to return, but never did. They walked in cautiously, breathing cold, still air that had been trapped inside for a decade. The whole restaurant gave off a sense of abandonment. No one was coming back. There was a small merry-go-round barely visible in the distant corner with four child-sized ponies still at rest from their last song. An instant, Shelley froze in place, as did the others. They were there. Eyes stared back from the dark, large, and lifeless. An illogical panic pulsed through her. Time held still. No one spoke, no one breathed, as though a predatory animal was stalking them. But as the moments passed, their fear waned until she was back again, as a child and with old friends separated from one another for far too long. Shirley walked toward the eyes in a straight line. Was behind her the others were motionless. Hers were the only footsteps. As Charlie walked, she touched the cold back of an old party chair. Without looking at it, getting it out of her path. She took one final step and the eyes in the dark became clear. It was them. Charlie smiled. Hi, she whispered, too soft for the others to hear. Before her stood three animatronic animals, a bear, a rabbit, and a chicken, all still standing as tall as adults, maybe taller. Their bodies were assembled like Arnes's models, each limb made of distinct squarish pieces, separated at the joints. They belonged to the restaurant, or maybe the restaurant belonged to them. And there had been a time when everyone knew them by name. There was Bonnie, the rabbit. His fur was a bright blue. His squared off muzzle held a permanent smile, and his wide and chipped pink eyes were thick lidded, giving him a perpetual worn out expression. His ears stuck out up straight, crinkling over at the top, and his large feet splayed out for balance. He held a red bass guitar, blue paws poised to play, and around his neck was a bow tie that matched the instrument's fairy color. Chicken the chicken was more bulky and had an apprehensive look, thick black eyebrows arching over her purple eyes and her beak slightly open, revealing teeth as she held up a cupcake and a platter. The cupcake itself was somewhat disturbing, with eyes set in its pink frosting and teeth hanging out over the cake. A single candle sticking out the top. I always expected the cupcake to jump off the plate. Carlton gave a half laugh and cautiously stepped up to Charlie's side. They seem taller than I remember, he added in a whisper. That's because you never got this close as a kid. Charlie smiled at ease and stepped closer. You're busy hiding under tables, Jessica said from behind them, still some distance away. Jessica wore a bib around her neck with the words, Let's eat, so in purple and yellow against a confetti covered background. A tuft of feathers stuck up in the middle of her head. Standing between Bonnie and Chico was Freddy Fazbear himself, namesake of the restaurant. He was the most general looking of the three, seeming at ease where he was, a robust of lean brown bear. He smiled down at the audience, holding a microphone in one paw, sporting a black bow tie and a top hat. The only incongruity of his features was the color of his eyes, a bright blue that surely no bear had ever had before him. His mouth hung open and his eyes were partially closed, as though he had been frozen in song. Carlton drew closer to the stage until his knees pressed against the rim of it. "Hey, Freddie," he whispered. "Long time no see." He reached out and grabbed at the microphone, wiggling it to see if he could get it loose. "Don't," Charlie blurted, looking up into Freddie's fixed gaze as though making sure he hadn't noticed. Carlton put his hand back as though he had touched something hot. "Sorry." "Come on," John said, cracking a smile. "Don't you want to see the rest of the place?" They spread across the room, peering into corners and carefully trying doors, acting as though everything might be breakable to the touch. John went over to the small carousel and Carlton disappeared into the dark arcade off of the main room. "I remember it being a lot brighter and noisier in here." Carlton smiled as though home again, running his hands over the aging knobs and flat plastic buttons. "I wonder if my high score is still in there," he muttered to himself. To the left of the stage was a small hallway. Half hoping no one would notice where she had gone, Charlie started down it silently as the others occupied themselves with their own curiosities. At the end of the short plain corridor was her father's office. It had been Charlie's favorite place in the restaurant. She liked to play with her friends in the main area, but she loved the singular privilege of coming back here when her father was doing paperwork. She paused outside the closed door, her hand poised over the knob, remembering. Most of the room was filled with his desk, his filing cabinets, and small boxes of uninteresting parts. In one corner was a smaller filing cabinet, painted in a salmon color that Charlie had always insisted was pink. That had been Charlie's. The bottom drawer held toys and crayons, and the top had what she liked to call my paperwork, was mostly coloring books and drawings, but occasionally she would go over to her father's desk and try to copy down whatever he was trying in a childish crayon hand. Charlie tried the door, but it was locked. Better this way, she thought. The office was personal, and she did not really want to open it tonight. She headed back to the main dining room and found Joanna looking pensively to the merry-go-round. He eyed her with curiosity, but did not ask where she had gone. "I used to love this scene," Charlie smiled, approaching warmly, yet now the painted figure seemed odd and lifeless to her. John made a face as though he had knew what she was thinking. "Not the same," he said, rubbing his hand over the top of a polished pony as though to scratch it behind the ear. "Just not the same," he repeated, removing his hand and gazing elsewhere. Charlotte glanced over to see where the others were in the arcade. She could see Jessica and Carlton wandering among the games. The consoles stood still and unlit like massive tombstones. Their screens blank. "I never liked playing the games," Jessica said, smiling. "They move too fast, and just when I start out to figure what to do, I die, and it will be someone else's turn." She wiggled the joystick that had squeaked from neglect. "They were widget anyway," Carlton said with a wink. "When was the last time you played one of these?" Jessica asked, peering closely into one of the screens to see what image was burned into it from too many years of use. Carlton was busy rocking a pinball machine back and forth, trying to get a ball to come loose. There's a pizza place I visit sometimes." He slipped the table back on four legs carefully and glanced back at Jessica. "But it's no Freddy's," he added. John was roaming through the dining room again amid the tables, flicking the chairs and spirals hanging overhead. He plucked a red party hat from the table, stretching the rubber band hanging loosely from its base, and it snapped it around his head, red and white tassels hanging out over his face. "Oh, let's check out the kitchen," he said. Charlie followed as he bounded off toward it. Although the chicken had been off limits to her friends, she spent a lot of time there, so much that the chefs chased her out by name, or at least by the name they heard her called out by her father, Charlotte. John overheard someone calling her Charlotte one day when they were in kindergarten and persisted in teasing her with it constantly. She would always get a rise out of her with that. It wasn't that Charlie didn't like her full name, but Charlie was who she was to the world. Her father called her Charlotte, and it was like a secret between them, something no one else had allowed to share. The day she left Hurricane for good, the day they said goodbye, John had hesitated. "Bye, Charlie," he said in their cards, letters, and phone calls. She had never called her Charlotte again. She never asked why, and he never told her. The kitchen was still fully stocked with pots and pans, but it had little interest for Charlie in the midst of her memories. She headed back into the open space of the dining room, and John followed. At the same time, Jessica and Carlton stumbled out of the arcade, tripping into each other as they crossed the threshold between rooms in the dark. "Anything interesting?" John asked. Uh, a gun wrapper, 30 cents, and Jessica, so no, not really, Carlton said. Jessica playfully gave him a punch in the shoulder. "Oh, have we all forgotten?" Jessica said, an evil smile pointing to another hallway to the opposite end of the dining room. She headed toward it swiftly before anyone could answer, and they followed her. The hallway was long and narrow, and the further they went, the less the flashlight seemed to illuminate. At last, the passage opened into a small room for private parties, set up with its own tables and chairs. As they entered, there was a collectively hush. There in the front of them was a small stage, the curtain drawn. A sign was strung across the front, out of order, in neat handwritten red letters. She stood still for a minute, then Jessica went up to it and poked the sign. "Pirates Cove," she said. 10 years later, and it's still out of order. Don't touch it, Charlie thought. "I have one birthday back here," John said. "It was out of order then, too." He took hold of the edge of the curtain and rubbed the glittered fabric between his fingers. "No," Charlie wanted to say, but stopped. "You're being silly," she chided herself. "Do you think he's still back there?" Jessica said playfully, threatening to make the reveal with one giant swing on the curtain. "I'm sure he is." John gave a false smile, seeming uncomfortable for the first time. "Yes, he's still here," Charlie thought. She stepped back cautiously, suddenly becoming aware of the drawings and posters surrounding him like spiders on the wall. Charlie's flashlight carefully inched from picture to picture, all depicting different variations of the same character. A large and emperor pirate fox with a patch over one eye and a hook for a hand, especially swinging out to deliver a pizza to hungry children. "This is the room where you were the one hiding under tables," Jessica said to Charlie, tried to laugh. "But you're a big girl now, right?" Jessica climbed up on the stage unsteadily, almost losing her footing. John reached out a hand to steady her as she righted herself. She doodled nervously, looking down at the others as though for guidance, then grabbed hold of the tasseled edge of the fabric. She waved her other hand in front of her face as dust fell from the cloth. "Maybe this isn't a good idea," she laughed, but there was an edge in her voice, like she really meant it, and she looked down at the stage for a moment, as though poised to climb back down. Still, she didn't move, taking the edge of the curtain again. "Wait," John said. "Can you hear that?" They were all dead quiet, and in the silence, Charlie could hear them all breathing, John's breaths were deliberate and calm. Jessica's quick and nervous. As though about it, her own breathing began to feel odd, like she had forgotten how to do it. I don't hear anything, she said. Me neither, Jessica echoed. What is it? Music. It's coming from. He gestured back the way he had come. From the stage? Charlie cocked her head to the side. I don't hear it. It's like a music box, she said. Charlie and Jessica listened carefully, but their blank expressions didn't change. It stopped, I guess. John gestured his gaze forward. Maybe it was an ice cream truck, Jessica whispered. Hey, that wouldn't be so bad right now. John appreciated the levity. Jessica turned her attention back to the curtain, but John began to hum a tune to himself. It reminded me of something, he mumbled. Okay, here we go, Jessica announced. She did not move. Charlie found her eyes drawn to Jessica's hand on the curtain. Her pink manicured nails pale against the dark glittering fabric was almost like the hushed moment in a theater crowd when the lights went dark but the curtain had not yet risen. They were all anticipating, but they were not watching a play, no longer playing a game. All the mirth had gone out of Jessica's face. Her cheekbones stood out stark in the shadows. Her eyes looked grim as though the simple thing she was about to do might be of terrible consequence. As Jessica hesitated, Charlie realized her hand hurt. She was making a fist so tight her nails began into her flesh. But she could not force herself grip to loosen. A crash sounded from back the way they came, a cascading, clanging noise ringing out and filling the whole space. John and Charlie froze, meeting each other's eyes and sudden panic. Jessica dropped the curtain and left up the stage, jumping to Charlie and knocking the light out of her hands. Where's the way out? She exclaimed, and John came over to help. They hurriedly searched the halls, and John chased the light beam spiraling across the floor. Just as they were all back to their feet, Carlton came trotting in. I knocked over a bunch of pots in the kitchen, he exclaimed, an apology amid the panic. I thought you were with us, Charlie said. I wanted to see if there's any food left, Carlton said, not making it clear if he'd find anything or not. Seriously? John laughed. Then that guard might have heard, Jessica said anxiously. We have to get out of here. They started for the door, and Jessica started running. The rest of them took off after her, picking up speed as they reached the hallway until they were racing as though something were behind them. Run, run! John called out, and they all burst into giggles, the panic fading but the urgency real. They squeezed back through the door one by one and pushed it shut with the same painful squeal. Carlton and John leaned on it until it sealed. They all took hold for the shelf, hefting it back into place and replacing the stools so that it appeared undisturbed. Look good, Jessica said, and John turned her arm, guiding her way. They made their way quickly but carefully back the way they came, using only Carlton's penlight. Back through the empty hallways and the open atrium to the parking lot. The guard's light did not appear again. Little anticlimactic, Carlton said with disappointment, checking one by one more times in hopes they were being chased. Are you kidding? Shirley said as she went to her car, already pulling the keys free from her pocket. She felt as though something lodged deep inside her had been disturbed, and she was not sure if that was a good thing or not. That was fun, John exclaimed, and Jessica laughed. That was terrifying, she cried. It can be both, Carlton said, grinning widely. Charlie began to laugh, and John joined in. What? Jessica said. Charlie shook her head, still laughing a little. It's just, we're all exactly the same as we were. I mean, we're totally different and older and everything, but we're the same. You and Carlton sound exactly like you did when we were 6. Right, Jessica said, rolling her eyes again, but John nodded. I know what you mean, he said, and so does Jessica. She doesn't like to admit it. He glanced back at the mall. Is everyone sure the guard didn't see us?